You know, um, we always try to bring common sense to the world of work, and sometimes that world feels like it doesn't have a lot of sense, right? And today we are going to be tackling something that I think we can all relate to, and that's dealing with difficult people. And to help us with this deep dive, we're going to be looking at the book, The Asshole Survival Guide by Robert Sutton. Now, even if you've never met a certified workplace asshole, and yeah, that's actually Sutton's term, not mine, this book really does have some great advice on how to deal with any difficult person that you might come across in the office. Think of this as your toolkit to not just survive, but to really thrive when you have to deal with those challenging personalities, those colleagues that make you just go, ugh. One of the things that Sutton does is he starts off by making a distinction between what he calls certified assholes and then what he calls temporary assholes.
And I think that this is where it gets really, really interesting, because when you understand the difference in the root of the behavior, it really can help you figure out how you should respond in each different situation. So a certified asshole, if you will, is that person that just seems to have jerks as just their default setting. It's ingrained. They don't even realize they're doing it. Sutton actually gives this example in the book of this CEO who would habitually call all of his employees Filipino pigs. Okay, so pretty clearly this is not a guy that's going to be winning any Boss of the Year awards anytime soon, right? But on the other hand, you have these temporary assholes, and these are the people that exhibit those less than ideal behaviors, maybe because they're just super stressed out, or maybe they're just having a really bad day. It's situational. It's not actually who they are as a person. So it's almost like we need a way to triage jerks. Is it like a chronic case, or is this just like a temporary flare-up? And once you know that, that will really help you figure out the best way to deal with it. Now, here's the thing, and I think that you'll relate to this.
Often when it comes to dealing with difficult people, we are our own worst enemy. We will make excuses for them, we will downplay the situation, and we delay taking action. Sutton actually outlines 10 common lies that we tell ourselves, and they kind of fall into 3 different categories. First we have the denial category, and this is where we say things like, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, I'm sure it'll get better. And then you have the wishful thinking category, and here we tell ourselves things like, well, things will get better soon, or I'll just stick it out until I finish this project and then I'm out of here. And then the last category is the self-sacrifice category, and here's where we tell ourselves things like, well, I'm learning so much it's worth the abuse, or I'm the only one who can fix this. Which of those have you told yourself? Any of those sound familiar to you? I know I've definitely been guilty of a few of those myself, but I think the important thing is to recognize these patterns, because that is the first step to breaking free from them, right? You deserve to work in an environment where you feel respected and valued. And even if you can't actually change the other person's behavior, you can absolutely change how you react to it. And that is what gives you the power. So, okay, how do we actually deal with these certified or even temporary assholes? Well, Sutton has a whole bunch of techniques, and some of them are a lot more creative than others. Like he talks about limiting exposure, which, that one's pretty self-explanatory. If you know a meeting is going to be a complete soul suck fest because someone's going to be there, maybe you just conveniently can't find that meeting invite in your inbox.
Yeah.
Then there's not feeding the troll. And this one's all about refusing to engage in those arguments that are completely pointless. The ones that are just going to fuel their fire. It's like those never-ending comment wars that you see online. Sometimes you do not want to be the one adding fuel to that dumpster fire. Sutton also talks about using camouflage, and basically this is just blending in and becoming invisible to the asshole. Think of it like you're flying under the radar. You're not making yourself a target. And then if that doesn't work, there's always the human shield technique. And this is where you strategically position yourself behind a colleague who's a little bit more assertive, or someone who's not afraid to stand up to the office bully, and they can deflect some of that negativity. One of the most interesting stories that Sutton shares in the book is about this engineer who actually managed to survive 15 years working at Apple. And he did it by simply avoiding Steve Jobs. Now, we all know Steve Jobs was a visionary, right? But he was also notoriously difficult to work with. And this engineer knew that if he wanted to keep his sanity, he had to keep his interactions with Steve Jobs to an absolute minimum. And guess what it worked on? This story really shows how sometimes the simplest solution, it really is the best one. Okay, but what about those times when avoidance just isn't an option? Like, what if you're stuck in a meeting with a certified jerk? Or what if you report directly to someone who just seems to really thrive on making your life miserable? Sutton calls this mitigating the poison. And it's all about controlling your reaction to the situation rather than trying to control the other person. And he talks about reminding yourself that you're not alone in this and it's not your fault, and that taking the high road is ultimately the most empowering choice you can make. And, he also suggests trying to find the humor in the situation if you can do that. Imagine yourself like 5 years from now looking back on this. How much is it really going to matter then? And then one of my personal favorite tips is to try to disconnect emotionally from what the asshole is saying or doing. It's almost like you're building a mental shield to deflect their negativity. I know it's not easy, but it is possible, and it really is so much better than letting them drag you down to their level.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I do want to highlight something really interesting that Sutton points out about company culture. He talks about Netflix and their very famous "no assholes, no bozos" policy. And, while that might sound like something straight out of Silicon Valley, there's actually a lot of wisdom in that statement, because it highlights this idea that skills and experience, they aren't the only things that matter. When you're hiring someone, you also need to consider if they're going to be a good fit for the company culture. And if someone is constantly just creating drama or putting other people down or just generally being a pain in the neck to work with, it's probably not worth it, no matter how talented they are.
So Sutton says, you want to hire colleagues, not just skills. And that's something that I think we can all apply to our lives, whether we're hiring or not. Think about the people that you choose to spend time with, both at work and outside of work. Are they people who lift you up and support you and just make you feel good about yourself? Or are they kind of like energy vampires? They just drain you of your enthusiasm and leave you feeling depleted. The people that we surround ourselves with, they have a huge impact on our well-being, and it's definitely worth being intentional about who we let into our lives. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? I think it's that we have way more power than we realize when it comes to dealing with these difficult people. We can choose to avoid them. We can choose to control how we react to them. And we can even choose to create work environments where certified assholes just aren't tolerated, It's not always easy, but it is absolutely possible. Now, I want to leave you with something to think about. Take a look at your own work life. Are there any situations where these insights from Sutton's book could be helpful? Maybe there's a certified asshole that you need a strategy for, or maybe you've been telling yourself one of those 10 lies that we talked about, to avoid dealing with the situation head on. Whatever it is, just take a moment to think about how you can use what we've discussed today to improve your own work life. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to work in an environment where we feel respected, valued, and empowered. And remember, you have the power to make that happen. Until next time, keep it classy, keep it common sense, and keep those assholes at bay.